Okay, welcome back, class. Sorry about having to pause the video back there. My throat has not been feeling well, and I decided to take a little break and myself a rest, but I'm going to record the rest of this lecture and then get it posted ASAP for you. So we ended here where we were talking about how wealth is involved in marriage. As I said before, there is almost always, no, there is always some sort of economic exchange that takes place between marriage partners, or more likely marriage partners' families, before a marriage happens. And the type of exchange that takes place sort of dictates what kind of marriage it's going to be. And so we're going to go through some of these. These are all going to be on the exam, everything on this PowerPoint. So the first one is arranged marriage, which you are probably familiar with. You've seen it in popular culture, movies, and films. We're familiar with arranged marriage, and it still happens in the United States, although it's pretty much gone out of style. Arranged marriage is a practice in which family members, usually parents, choose the partner for marriageable youths, sometimes with little or no input from or option for the partner themselves. So basically, it's saying that your parents pick your partner for you. Now, Korea still has quite a bit of arranged marriage, but there's not really any arranged marriage in Korea anymore, where there's little or no input from the youth, from the people who are actually getting married. We'll talk about this later, but they still have arranged marriage, where the parents will pick a group of people that the child can then choose from, or the child could veto a choice that the parent makes. So there's a lot of range inside of arranged marriage. It's not just one kind of arranged marriage. So hypergamy is a marriage practice of marrying up with a spouse with a higher status, class, or caste than oneself. This typically happens where a woman will marry up, but in the United States and other more developed countries, this is starting to change, where you see men marrying up more often, but typically it will be a woman from a lower socioeconomic class that will marry up into a higher socioeconomic class. There are things called bride wealth, or sometimes called bride price. Don't worry, you can use either one. And it is the marriage wealth exchange practice in which a man or his family must pay an amount of property to his wife's kin before he may assume rights over his wife. So this is sort of like you will see in agricultural societies, where women are sort of treated as property, and the woman gets a certain portion of the land from their parents. So things like that. So the man's house is essentially, the man's family is essentially paying for the bride, or paying the family in order to take possession of the bride, because they've done the hard work of raising her since birth, and she is now going to join the man's family, and so they pay her for that. Bride service, the marriage wealth exchange practice in which a man must labor for his wife's kin for some period of time before he may assume rights over his wife. So this is a type of marriage practice that's very similar to bride wealth or bride price, except it happens in lower socioeconomic classes and poorer nations, where it's sort of indentured servitude, where you're still paying for the bride, paying the family to assume rights over the bride, but you're doing it with labor over an extended period of time, instead of just with cash, or chickens, or any of these other things that might be used as commodities. So a dowry is a little bit different. A dowry is the marriage wealth exchange practice in which the woman's family is required to provide the husband with property, money, land, household goods, it could be a lot of different things, in order to make the marriage. So this is was something that you see quite a bit in China, where the family not only when you have a daughter, the family not only needs to raise the daughter, but they also need to spend money in order to marry her off. They need to pay a man in order to marry her. And so that's why some countries like India, I believe, also uses a dowry. Don't quote me on that. And China, they have these sort of strong preferences for male children, because the male children will bring in wealth to the family and the female children will not. These are a little table I got. It. I don't believe it's from your book, but I liked the table just to give you some context of where some of these things take place. But not all of this. Like for example, we didn't go over groom price. Don't worry about groom price. But this is just another way to look at this information and to show you that there's even further types of marriages. that anthropologists distinguish between. These are not on the exam either, but I just thought I would mention them. There's some other kinds of marriage practices. I'm not going to go over them now, but it's interesting to look over. Okay, so residence after marriage is also another consideration that anthropologists look into very deeply. Um, so you're going to have to know everything that's on this page. Patrilocal. So this is where the new family will go to live, right? So patrilocal, patrilocality, patrilocation, it all means the same thing. The residence practice of living with or near the husband's family after marriage. So, oftentimes, people who get married, the man's family and the woman's family may live very far away from each other. They may live just a town over from each other, or they may even live in the same village, depending on if they're exogamous or endogamous. Those are terms that we went over last time. But patrilocality says that after the man and the wife get married, the man and the woman get married, they will live near the husband's family, wherever that may be. Now, matrilocality is exactly the opposite, the residence practice of living with or near the wife's family after marriage. This can also sometimes mean living in the same house with the wife's family, or living in the same house with the father's family in the case of patrilocality. So it could also be the exact same building, which was common, particularly in East Asia. Now, there's also ambilocal residence, and that's a practice in which individuals may live after marriage with both sides of the family, sometimes even alternating between the two, or they have the option to pick, I'll live with the father's side or the mother's side. Ambilocal isn't terribly common around the world, but it is something that takes place. More often than not, you see patrilocality. But we're starting to, as economic development takes place, where many places are becoming neolocal. So neolocal is the residence practice in which married people start their own household apart from their parents or families. So in the United States, we are of course neolocal. We don't typically have some sort of a we don't have some sort of a cultural practice where it's just understood that most people after marriage will go live with the father, the groom's family, for example. We are neolocal. It's generally practiced where after you get married, you will set up a new residence with your new family, with your new nuclear family. But I also like to point out that there's no reason why marriage and residence should necessarily coincide, and in many societies they do not. I'm going to have an example in a little bit that a little video we're going to watch of an example of something like that. So descent. Many societies, but not all societies, use descent to create groups. Okay, so how a family is descends and what kind of lineage system they use is a big determinant on other parts of that society's culture. So we're gonna get some definitions here out of the way. As I told you, this chapter 19 and 20 is pretty definition heavy, so I apologize for that. But I'm going to try to contextualize some of this stuff for you in a minute. So lineage is a kinship-based corporate group composed of members related by descent from a known ancestor. Okay? So that's the classic definition of descent, right? You, and if you have brothers and sisters, are all part of the same lineage because you have a known ancestor, which is your mother or your father. And you all might be of the same lineage with him because you all know your grandparents, right? So this is the classic kind of lineage. Now, matrilineal descent is a descent system in which lineage relations are traced through a line related to females. Children belong to their mother's corporate group. You don't see this very often, but there are some matrilineal societies where you are not, once you marry into a family, you're not considered to be part of um, the male side of the family. You're considered to be part of the female side of the family, and your children will not belong to the male side, they'll belong to the female. Now, of course, our society is a little bit different, but our society is sort of patrilineal, a descent system in which lineage relations trace through a line of related males. Now, I don't mean to say we're patrilineal, but we used to be very patrilineal. Remember, all of these things exist on a spectrum. Children belong to their father's corporate group in that typically when a man and a woman get married in the United States, everyone will take the woman will take the male's last name, and all the children will take that last name as well. Now that's changing. Some people are hyphenating their names, and some people are taking the woman's name, and there's a shift. But we have this vestige, this history in the United States of being patrilineal. However, really, I think that we are more unilineal today. This is this middle one right here, unilineal descent, a principle in which individuals trace their ancestry through a line of related to kin, that's male or female, such that some blood relatives are included in the descent group and others relatives are excluded. So unilineal is just saying that they trace it through both lines, typically. So it's understood that even though in the United States we generally take the male's last name after marriage and the children get that last name too, we understand that the wife is doesn't is there's a bloodline there. We relate it to science and talk about it through this idea of bloodlines, and we understand that they are related. These are not going to be on the exam, but I did want to show them to you so you can look them over. Uh, I'm not going to read them right now. I'm sorry, my throat is still bothering me, but please do take some time to read these and see some different kinds of kinship groups. Or, I'm sorry, forms of descent. And I'm going to stop the video here. We'll continue this example when we get back.